This program is brought to you by Emory University.
It's not true that if we all live long enough, we'll get Alzheimer's disease. This is clearly a disease. Some people could live forever, and as far as we know, seem to not get Alzheimer's disease. So it's truly a disease that has been recognized for a short time. So what is it that we've learned that causes it? And clearly this is where we begin to really get insights into the biology of the disease and how we can think about this from a predictive health point of view. Alzheimer's disease is really the prototypical complex trait disease, where it's an interaction of genetic and environmental influences. Almost all the brain diseases I like to think about in this context. And I think about environment broadly, including learning, what you get exposed to, your lifestyle, as well as more typical toxic things in the environment, the air we breathe and things like that. Alzheimer's disease, most research has shown that genetics plays the lion's share. So what we now know, this list changes every time I give a talk because it's so actively growing. What we know is that there are many risk factor genes. ApoE is by far the strongest one, so I put it up on the top. Among this list of 10 or 11 genes, they all fall in the same group because these are all common variants of genes. Okay, so these are all genes that we have. They're common polymorphisms. That means they occur in at least 5% or more of the population. So if we look at this class, 5 or 10 of you guys at least will have these variants that are going to be at risk in these genes. If you carry a variant in one of these genes, they're not in the coding regions of the genes. They just typically change the expression levels of these proteins that result from them. And they don't dictate whether you're going to get the disease. They have a very low impact. So typically any one of these genes, with the exception of ApoE, if you carry the disease, the gene variant that makes you more susceptible to Alzheimer's disease, it increases the risk only about 10%. Okay, so which is really small. So they're not very, and they're also not very specific. You can carry these variants and never get Alzheimer's disease. ApoE is different. Again, we're going to talk about that. The other gene class that's very different are what I call FAD genes, for familial Alzheimer's disease genes. And for those of you who have had genetics, these are now Mendelian genetics. The APP, presenilin 1, and presenilin 2, PS1, PS2, those three genes are all Mendelian. So as I'll say, they're going to be autosomal dominant. That means and there are mutations that change the actual coding sequence, the structure of the protein, more than the expression levels, although that also can change, can be relevant. These genes are not risk factor genes. These are bullets, basically. These are killers. They're cause and effect. If you have a mutation in any one of these genes, there's virtually a 100% chance you're going to get Alzheimer's disease. So genetics plays a huge role, but there clearly are things in the environment that also interact with the genome. They may change the likelihood. They may change the age of onset of the disease, so they can influence this whole disease process in different ways. Now, I've highlighted in here in red factors that have come out of multiple large epidemiological studies. Most of these have occurred in different populations around the world, and those in red confer increased risk of getting Alzheimer's disease, and those in green show some protective effects in various studies. So I won't go through all the details, just a couple that are notable. Hypertension, cholesterol, homocysteine, and diabetes all have a major thing in common. Anybody recognize what they're all risk factors for? Heart disease, cardiovascular disease. And so this is a big clue that there's vascular biology at play also in Alzheimer's disease. It does not, again, these are associations. These are not cause and effect. There have been some studies done trying to demonstrate cause and effect or show if you can lower risk that you can stop the progression of Alzheimer's disease. So far those have failed, but they have not really been done, I would say, in a good way yet. So I would say the jury's out. There are some things that seem to be protective. Education is really interesting. I told you some people have a brain full of Alzheimer's disease pathology. and yet they never have symptoms. More and more we learn about that condition, we're learning that people that are really highly educated, they have a lot of reserve, and they're the ones that are most likely to be able to be resilient to the pathology. So keep staying in school, graduate, get your PhD, your MD, your MPH, whatever you want to do. Keep lifelong learning at hand, because it really could play a big role in your futures. Exercise is remarkable. I just never would have thought 5 years ago that we would have learned as much about the positive effects of exercise on brain health as we're learning.
The preceding program is copyrighted by Emory University.